of elections, let's quickly look at the EC. Now, we are aware that almost all the parties have come together and agreed at the IPAC level. Those who form IPAC have come together to say that they need the EC to halt its plan to have, the voters register, to have a voters registration exercise halted until they have been able to meet to look at a few things. I'm sure that you would understand that they are looking at the fact that the Supreme Court had given some hints about the need for certain reforms which they are not aware have been carried out, and the EC appears to be in a hurry to go ahead with all of these processes. The Dankwa Institute, the pro-NPP governance think tank, also held a press conference and suggested that the EC should not be allowed to go ahead with the process. It must first of all conduct an audit of the last voters register because of the problems that came up with it. We have heard of the PNC also suggests that if the EC doesn't listen to the parties, they will take the EC to court to compel it to listen to them. Koku, following that, all of this issue, what's your understanding of what exactly the parties are looking for?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't done a thorough study of the issues involved. They just emerged into the open. But I think that what is important, really, that if parties who are key stakeholders in this process are raising issues, a platform is created for them to deal with the matter. That is, and I think the iPad, is it IPAC, is there for that particular.
I like the iPad.
It's there to deal with the issue. There's some commonsensical element in what the parties are calling for, the question of audit. And it's not the first time people have asked for audit. Our NDC friends actually did ask for audit, I recall, in 2008 or 7, before the 2008 elections, because they thought the register was bloated. Of course, somebody can argue that qualitatively, this register being biometric has a certain enhancement, some better features. As far as I'm concerned, I think one has to make that argument in terms of the drift. But the Supreme Court petition, the proceedings, also indicated that it could still have some problem areas. There's no doubt about that.
Correct.
So while this is a better register, more qualitative in terms of
This is what Paul Afoko said. He says, all is not well with Ghana's register. The petitioners in the case prove this point beyond all reasonable doubt. He goes on to talk about conflicting figures as far as the register, the total number of registered voters was concerned. I'm sure you are very familiar with that. Again, yes, basically some of these are the issues that he's mentioning. They have also raised questions about STL that up to date, we do not have our way clear as to what exactly they were supposed to do and all of that.
Well,
so
they can bring in all those elements. I think we should focus on the issue of the EC's decision to do some additional registration. And I believe it's to enable people who have turned 18 to register.
Correct.
As well as people over 18 who didn't register previously to come on board. And it's relative to the district assembly elections. Am I right?
That's right.
So this is an area. But I believe towards 2016, we ought to go to the election on a clean slate. That is something that I think is non-negotiable. The Supreme Court proceedings, there are elements that came up. Look, even the cross-examination of Dr. Farijan brought up certain issues to some extent was worrying because he's very experienced.
Right.
He's a master of the game in many respects. But the court's proceedings showed something that after all, there's something wrong somewhere, even with his own wealth of knowledge and experience. So I think the bottom line, there's no need for rancor at all on this matter. Let the EC agree to sit with the parties at the IPAC, deal with the issues. It makes sense to look at the issues raised by the parties before doing the registration and going for the district assembly elections or even the 2016 elections.
Maybe some will say banking, or grounding their call on the election petition is a non-starter, because why? They lost the election petition, so they cannot, use that as a grounds to say something ought to be done before. Otherwise, the process will not be clean.
And that's why I'm surprised at the statement that the petitioners were able to prove that something was wrong with the electoral register. That was not proven. Indeed, the EC indicated that the current system we are using, which is biometric, was capable of cleansing and detecting multiple registration. And when it did identify, those names were taken off. And Dr. Akwete and Kweku have indicated that is even an improvement. The current register we have is an improvement. Now they talk about audit.
When you talk about the courts not admitting that there was a bloated register, that's maybe fair enough. But you have some of the judges who, though, voted against, that head, but they did so because they said they felt that the impact was negligible. So it might not be entirely correct to say that they didn't make conclusions that suggest that there was something wrong with it. Just for the purpose of being more direct, I'll just read you just one of the judges who made recommendations for reforms, Justice Doshi, on the issue of bloated voters register. He said that there is no doubt that the petitioner's claim of a bloated voters register has been admitted by the second respondents in paragraph 8 of their second amended answer. The explanation for this phenomenon has been attributed to error. Explaining further, the second respondent stated that this 14,031,793 being announced as the total registered voters who turned out for the 7th and 8th of December 2012 presidential elections. Then he says, he comes to make a conclusion. He says that, let me just read this portion. He says that they, however, state that the error would only affect the turnout percentage and change the percentage from 79.43% to 80.15%. The error effect is really very negligible, but the credibility effect has it has on the second respondent as an electoral administrator, I will not give it any serious thought. So somehow,
I appreciate that point. I know where that paragraph is coming from in their pleadings because I was in the thick of affairs.
Right.
What the EC said was that they had initially given out a figure which was a provisional figure. But what they needed to do was to give out, when the register ended, they should have given out the final figure, which they didn't do. And that is their explanation there. So that is the error that they were talking about. It's not as if it was a grievous error which affected the foundation of the electoral register. But you see, the audit that they are talking about, this is rooted in law, but I don't know the kind of audit they are talking about, whether the register should come to a panel and then they will look at the names and see which name should be taken off and which name should not be taken off. Because I know under the laws, you exhibit, and that is the auditing. You exhibit, and you allow people like you and me go to the register, go to the polling station, and indicate that this person is dead.
Right.
There's proof that he's no more alive.
Right.
This person is no more in Ghana or whatever it is. That is the auditing. The auditing is done collectively as a people. Unless they want to come and tell us that there's another form of auditing. But
you knew that, and you were asking for management and something audit in 2007. You knew that was...
I will not be disrupted. I'm on fire. So the thing is that if this audit is done at the polling station, and if this audit is also rooted in law, the political party should come out and tell us the kind of audit they are looking for. There's some work to be done. And you know, the work of the EC is time-bound. There's going to be 20 elections. No, this are assembly elections in December or in November or so. People have turned 18. And I think that the EC must be seen working. Now, the EC under the laws is not subject to the control of anybody in this country. The only person who controls the EC...
It is subject to the Constitution.
That's what I'm saying. I'm now coming there. The only person who can the EC is subject to is our law courts. Now, the law courts is where you can go and say that the actions of the EC are unreasonable, are irrational. Then the courts will now look at it. But until then, the EC, like Koko has said, can only jaw with them, and I agree with that. They should be invited, and I heard the EC, a public relations officer, agreeing to that point that they will invite them. But the political party should not be seen dictating to the EC. That's very dangerous.
You find that to be a dictation to the EC. Now, Mr. Ikotu,
which they've done
is it
many times in the past?
Is it your view that because particularly Justice Atuguba and Doche gave certain indications of what ought to be done with the registrar or the register or the electoral process itself, we ought to see the EC saying these have been done before it takes the next step?
First of all, let me say that the auditing bit that Amalba is talking about is not his original idea. I heard somebody who was saying that he is an election monitor. And it is his view that after at the exhibition stage, that is where you do auditing. I don't think that that's what the people are calling for. What they are saying is that we have a bloated register. We don't know the figures. Compared with other countries, the turnout in Ghana, voter turnout in Ghana, is so high that there must be something wrong with our register. A population of 25 with voter turnout of over 50-something% is worrying.
Which the EC boss himself admits.
Exactly.
Is very curious.
So those are the issues that are being raised. Not necessarily because after you've exhibited, you can go and say A died and B died. Our names are said that sometimes it's difficult to go through that kind of situation. So all what they are saying is that, look, you are embarking on another voter registration, which will, at the end of the day, lead to a voter register. We have a problem with the first one, which we have all acknowledged. Why don't we look at it? If there's something to be done, let us deal with that one first before you go on to come and give us...
Like what?
But we all agree that the voter turnout is a problem.
And you know the figures are regulated by law, so like what?
But during cross-examination, which Kweku alluded to, the chairman himself admitted that we had multiple registrations. There were more than one name. Some appeared to be a woman, some appeared to be a man, some appeared to be older, some appeared to be younger. You know, we had all those things there. So clean your act. Let's look at it, and then we move on from there. What is wrong with that? Again, the Supreme Court judges spoke about the need for some reforms. Why can't we deal with that before we move on? I don't think that where is coming from.
Dr. Farejan himself doesn't really see what they are calling for as reforms, so to speak. And you may agree with him because you see that there's some tweaking here and there. And I remember, right? And I remember right after the judgment, this was one of the areas that you particularly paid attention to. Has it been your expectation that the EC would have come forward to tell us that these were the issues that were brought up and we have attended to them before it took the next step?
As to what it should do in sequence or concurrently, I think we should leave the institution, respect it. As it's very difficult to work under conditions where, as a technocrat, you are constantly under suspicion and there's mistrust. And that is what is breaking the backs of our technocrats in every institution. The suspicion and mistrust is so high, and immediately it polarizes. So the confidence of fixing problems is affected. They are more cautious than stepping forward boldly to do things. But that's what technocrats do. Once you've made the policy, leave it to me to implement. I know what I'm doing and I'm confident. It's not there. And I think what is important is that there were some proposals made to the EC. I believe they are working on. We've gone there to find out and say, hey, how are you handling this? They have their schedules. But I think communication with the parties and the broader society extremely important. I think that the way sometimes the parties must look at their relationship with the EC. If we should go on seeing parties as teams, football teams, dictating to FIFA and the referee, how could the game okay, be managed on the field. And that's what we are having, especially the two big parties. I was surprised when it got to this issue. They were, actually, I was looking at Honorable, the two gentlemen, Amaliba, and they were not only happy with themselves, they were writing with the same pen. He writes and gives the pen back to that guy. Yes. I was watching them. And so there are areas in which they agree. And I think you should agree on two things. One, I think the Electoral Commission is a bureaucracy. It's an administrative body. It's an independent body. They have technocrats well trained to deal with things. But the parties have a role as to whether the electoral register is credible or not. And Dr. Farijan has been fighting this. If you recall, in 2008, when the register was so bloated that he pointedly accused the parties of what they did. So let us also see the party's own role to say, look, we need to make this register credible. What is it that we ourselves can contribute to help them clear the system and have a stronger register than it is now? I think the parties should also begin to look at that. Two, I think there has to be a way to communicate with the state.
All the parties appear to agree on one point.
They agree on election things.
Opening the register for this particular exercise between June 20 and 29 is not good, because we are going to have the World Cup around this time. So there they agree.
Could it have been communicated?
But the other parties have gone a step further to make a demand that the EC ought to finish with the homework given by the
exactly what Amaliba called the dictation. And I'm saying that we should respect the institution and its competence. I saw it in South Africa. In fact, the party speaking about the Electoral Commission and so on is just inspiring. And the faith they have in them, the trust. It doesn't mean it's a perfect institution. But I think in our case, the parties have also been active, in the problem of us not having credible registers over the ages. But we've gotten to a point where we've improved it, but there are still weaknesses, administrative weaknesses. So let us see, how would the parties work engaged to get this cleared up, their own contribution to clearing this up, without having to dictate, do this first or that. I think it's wrong. We should respect the institution and put forward proposals and find ways of having constructive conversations. In any case, I don't think this matter should be left to parties and the EC alone. We are all stakeholders. And some of the proposals we've made to the EC...
Does this sound like a legitimate, natural demand, that this is what you ought to clean up first before you move to the next step?
You don't go dictating to Parliament and tell it, do this first before you do that. It's a legitimate demand to say, well, we think we should look at the issue of cleaning up the register because these things have come. How are you going about it?
But is it really about dictating, or we are looking at how long since the Supreme Court gave its verdict on
the institution? This is my own view. I think that the experience we went through, both for the parties and the Electoral Commission, affected organizations. I think the institution is under some stress, probably trauma. And it's a very important institution. So the parties could help bring it up.
Maybe an aspect of it is that the Supreme Court's recommendations are not binding on the EC.
No, you can't say they are.
He was asking the question what the parties have done. And I said I wanted to supply that information. As chairman of the Constitutional Committee, before the biometric constitutional instrument was passed, Chairman Jake tasked me to call some of our people to see if we can make some recommendations to the EC. We met, people like John Maynu, former chairman, Mark Maynu and the rest, were part of the team I worked with as chairman. And we produced a paper which we gave to him. After the elections also, we had met again, this time with Mark Maynu chairing, and we made further, recommendations. I can give him soft copies to look at. So we've been working. All right. Trying to. I don't know what the NDC. I don't know what the NDC.
30 seconds.
What was the need for the ultimatum?
No, it's necessary. If they won't listen, you go to court.
It's in law, as we call, evidence of anybody who is there qualified to vote. Now, because it is seen as evidence of a person's qualification to vote, you will need, before you can remove that person's name, go through some process to remove the name. You don't look at the person's name, face and say, this one looks like 20, I want to remove it. That's why a High Court judge somewhere indicated that the EC cannot remove people's names unless it goes through the legal process to remove those names. So political parties must be mindful of that too and be aware.
No, double registrations and the rest, they can deal with it. They told us they have cleaned the system.
No, I'm talking about removing people's names. Double registration is different. Double registration is different.
I think the parties have done a very important thing. You see, we all want to see the administrative improvements. And I think the EC ought to lay it out. What is this roadmap? And I think that's where the anxiety is, because the EC is also too quiet about it. What are they doing? They were very quick. By October last year, I think already in September, they had written asking for proposals. And so people are now, even in civil society, so the proposals, because many organizations supply that, maybe they ought to tell us what they are doing and how they are going to go ahead in solving some of the problems and so on. But if that's not happening, and then you say you are...
IEA has organized a workshop, a seminar for political parties, and that proposal is with them.
Yes, and different groups.
Thank you very much. You're still here on Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis show. Samuel says that we demand a complete audit of the voters register to repair its credibility before any further registration of new voters. Abdul Karim says, Samson, I'm always surprised seeing the NDC a man supporting the EC and an MPP man arguing against the EC. Is the EC an independent institution at all? Ghana deserves better. Kwesi K says that Samson, I blame the media for giving party leaders the opportunity and platform to insult each other. I think they should control what people, especially politicians, say on the airwaves. Thank you very much for the messages that have come through so far. We'll take a quick break here. We'll return. I'll read a few of the messages more to you before we take a break here. Joseph Yamin says, Samson, it seems the NPP is not ready to manage the affairs of this country because they are even finding it very difficult to manage their internal wrangling. How much more Ghana's problems? And then who is next? Okay, your message is too long. Please... Okay, unfortunately, that's where I'll end it. I'll go for a break here.